I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Our focus this week is the city of Joplin. Honored to join me. We have Gary Shaw and San Anselm. Thank you very much for being here, Mayor and City Manager.
Good to see you, Judy. Thank you for inviting us.
Mayor, you have been mayor before. This is another chance for you to be mayor of the city of Joplin. If people come up to you on the street and say, well, how are things going, Mr. Mayor? How do you answer that as far as your perspective?
Well, overall, Judy, I think it's going great. Of course, I have a pretty positive nature, and I try to find the good in everything that we're doing. I'm not always successful, but most generally I try to. But, the city of Joplin's blessed. It's been interesting after the tornado to see all the recovery we've gone through. Our people have grown stronger together. We've worked together, and I think it's great. It's a little different. Of course, when I was mayor before, right. It was a couple of years before the tornado, and things had been going the same for a number of years, but it's different. I really I don't know that it's quite the same. There's different challenges now. Mm-hmm. There's different things going on. Social media is now something that's new and dealing with. And when you're an old timer, I guess, like I am, some of that's a little bit hard to understand and to deal with. But the city of Joplin is we're moving ahead and progressing, and I'm certainly glad. I'm blessed and happy to be a part of it.
Great. Well, Sam, you mentioned a lot of the changes, and you've been very involved in those changes, especially post-tornado. The Joplin looks different than it did 70 years ago.
It does. There are lots of orange traffic cones around right now, and have been for a couple of years, and will be for another year or so.
All right. So today we can maybe provide some updates on some of those changes and things still to come, and let people know what's happening. But of course, City Council is one of the time when people are most watching what's happening with the city, but there's a lot happening behind the scenes as well.
Certainly.
But the City Council, you have your monthly meetings, first and third Monday. KGCS is airing those for people in the community to see it. But council members put in a lot of time beyond just those meetings twice a month.
Well, obviously we do, and in addition to the regular meetings that we have, we normally have work sessions every month as well, and we sometimes there's something comes up where we have to have special meetings, and each one of our council members are liaison to one of our commissions or boards, and so they attend those meetings and to take advantage of our citizens that are volunteering in those areas to pass some of the information that we're considering on and get information from them. And then, when someone has a zoning request and things like that, it's important for us to go and look at them and see what we're dealing with rather than just making a decision off a piece of paper. Of course, our staff does an outstanding job of supporting us and giving us all that information, and they even make recommendations. But, when it comes down to making a decision, you like to have as much information as you can.
From the staff perspective, you're working hard behind the scenes before we actually see the council take a seat at the meeting. You're getting those reports together. Your staff is putting all those materials together.
Yeah, we have over 580 full-time employees, full-time equivalent employees that work to make the organization happen. So, when council makes a decision, it's my job to make sure that we have the resources in the right places to implement those decisions and those projects and those programs. And very proud of the staff that we have. Tremendously hard-working. Obviously, post-tornado 2011 had an added workload, but we've been able to shoulder that pretty well.
People may not realize the scope of the different departments in the city. They see the orange cones and they think, well, the city fixes streets. But you have a lot of employees representing different departments.
Yeah, we have about 14 different departments in the city. We're a city our size. It's not very common that we have a city health department, and most of those are run at the county level. But we have a city health department that we're proud of. That's been run by Dan. I know he's been here several times, and tremendous asset for the community, having his experience and his knowledge and understanding of things. And I can say the same for all of our department heads. We've got a good leadership team in place, and very proud of them.
So there are many ways the citizens interact with the city, maybe not even without realizing it, with the services that are provided by the city.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And a lot of folks don't realize that almost all of our employees are under Sam's supervision. He's, as the city manager, all those folks work for him. The council only has 5 employees. We have a city manager, a city clerk, city attorney, and we have the municipal judge, and we also have the public defender. And those are the only ones that answer to us. So all the rest of them we can blame on Sam, say, but he carries the load. But and he does a good job, and he really does. And like he mentioned, our department heads, A lot of them have been around for several years, and they know the job, and they do the job, and they do it well. And really the only time they really have challenges is when people don't really understand what's going on. But when they ask questions and get answers, they normally see where we're coming from and why we do some of the things that we do and so forth.
So a big part of it is communication. Do you as a councilman get a lot of calls from citizens, or do they just pick up the phone and call you, or is it a mix of the two?
Well, I think it's both. It does. I mentioned social media a little while ago, and while there's aspects of it I don't like, there are aspects of it I do like. I really like the fact that people can email me, and they can email, then I can email them back, and I try to answer every email. And I like messaging on the phone as well. To me, I don't like to intrude on people when I don't know what they're doing. I respect their time is important as well. So when I can send them a message, if I want to send Sam a message, I can do it. Then when he has time, he can call me back. And so those have worked well. And we do try to. One of the things that we've tried over the years to do is we want to provide the services for our citizens, but unless they know what those services are, unless we answer their questions when they have them, they don't realize really what's going on. And so Sam and his folks have been working real hard to come up with apps and come up with different things that we can get into the now generation and answer people's questions and get their needs met. And that's our goal. We represent the citizens, but we also want to take care of them. We live in this community too, and it's important that we take care of our neighbors and friends and folks that live
Working
here.
together. And of course, I know that you get phone calls, but then you can direct it to the department heads that they may be questioning or have questions about.
Yeah, we receive several phone calls a day in my office and other departments as well, just everything from tall grass, and obviously all the rain we've had, there's a lot of tall grass around there. So if you see some, and especially if it's on city property, ask for residents to have a little bit of patience, because we're getting to it as quickly as we can. But same situation for a lot of neighbors, so we get a lot of those nuisance calls, but really we get a lot of calls about, hey, how do I register to vote, or how do I get a copy of my marriage license or information
Things
like
that people need personally.
Yeah, and we might not necessarily provide that direct service, but we're happy to point people in the right direction and make sure they land in the right spot.
So resource information in many cases.
Yeah. One of the things, Judy, that a lot of people think, and I did when I first got on the council, is I'd drive down the street and I'd see a street light out, or I'd see a hole in the pavement, and I'd say, why in the world don't they take care of that? Well, it was pointed out to me after a while that they don't always know about those things, and
Not driving down that same street.
that's right. And if you don't take the time to let them know, let the city know, then we can't take care of them. But if you find a pothole, if you find a street light that's not out, write it down. When I first got on the council 17 years ago, the street lights were a challenge to me. I saw a lot of them that were out, so I put me a little spiral notebook in my car, and when I wrote them down, and I turned them in, and they got turned on. So if you see something that needs to be done, if you let City Hall know, they'll take care of it.
And you have a website. I know that you can even report those things without having to pick up the phone.
We do, and Mayor Shaw had mentioned, one of the options that we're looking at is really sort of an online, more app-based reporting system that people can download to their phones. I think it's both Apple and Android supportive, but we haven't quite made the decision on that yet. We're going to have a meeting here before too long with council to sort of give them an online demonstration of what it looks like, but really to make that process easier. We do what we can to respond as quickly as we can on the back end of those things. So for a pothole, for example, we'll typically respond to that within 48 hours. But as the mayor mentioned, sometimes we don't know that it's there unless we hear from a resident. And so we do our best to be as proactive and as quick to respond as we can.
So community involvement and people giving you feedback.
There are a lot of the folks out there that are like I am. We still want to write our checks, and we still want to make telephone calls and stuff. But there are a lot of the younger people that want to do everything with that little phone, and so we're trying to make it so it can apply to however you want to take care of it. You can take care of your business.
Great. So reach all generations, all types of people.
You bet.
Well, I know recently there's been a lot of coverage of the city council and the budget process, and I thought today we can just I guess the process, maybe not the debates about things, but it's something that the city starts looking at well before you as a council members are trying to make decisions at this time of year.
Sure.
So kind of give us some background, how this comes together.
Well, and of course Sam will know more about that than I, other than the fact that, we get involved in later in the year. But the truth of the matter is that the budget is on our mind all year long, because we're trying to see if we're doing things that are within the budget or requests that are outside the budget. But my understanding is the budget starts in April, and the department heads started making their request and their capital improvements or anything that they want to do in their areas, and they let Sam know and his staff, and then it proceeds on down. There's so much that has to be done later on in the year. Leslie has to prepare the budget. Of course, it's Sam's budget, the city manager's budget, but the council has to approve it. So there's different points in the year when it has to be turned in. It has to be, I believe, to the council by the second meeting in August. We have to have it to look at, and then we always in September always look forward to getting that book that's about that thick,
details
full of numbers. And fortunately, they do prepare a smaller book that helps us to understand what all those bigger book says. But it's all items that are important. Every item that's in there is money that's being spent for something that's done in the city, and then Sam and his team does a great job in informing us. And then obviously we have to have the budget completed by I think it's the second meeting in October, because our new year starts November the 1st and runs through October 31st. And
so
Sam, say whatever you want to about
so people may not realize that time schedule is not January 1st, it's November 1st.
Every city has a different fiscal year. Ours just happens to fall on November 1st, and as the mayor said, we spend about 6 months preparing the budget and about 6 months trying to stick to it. So obviously things happen and situations come up mid-year that we have to make adjustments for, but we do our best, again, starting late April, early May, to anticipate what our needs are going to be for the next fiscal year, getting that information ready for council to have discussions about what priorities they have, and implementing those priorities through the programs that we offer.
So it's ultimately the council that approves it or says, no, we're going to revise things, or we're going to make these changes.
And during budget session, we have groups that come in, like the chamber and like the museum, and like our employees. Folks come to us, and police and fire, and present things to us that they'd like for us to consider. Sometimes it's increases, sometimes it's looking beyond where we are now and what we might be able to do, and we'd like to take care of those things. And it would, we live in a time when a lot of things are happening on the internet, and our sales tax is not as strong as it could be and we'd like for it to be. And unfortunately, we didn't get our use tax passed. And again, I think part of that was because folks didn't understand. They just don't like the word tax. Nobody does.
Word for voters, right?
It really is. And none of us like to pay additional tax, but that was just a tax, that would help us. That's going somewhere else now that could come locally to those people who have invested in our community. So we probably will look at maybe putting that back on the agenda later on. But it's those sales tax that are important to help us to be able to make the to use the budget, to put a budget in pay increases for all of our employees. All of our employees are important to us. Our police and fire, they do an outstanding job, and there have been some folks that try to put us at odds with them. Well, we're not odds with them. They're part of our team. We respect them. We try to honor them in any way we can, and it's just like I stopped and got a hamburger a while back, and at Cunningham Park, and I looked out there and I watched all those guys out there with the little weed eaters going 90 mile an hour, going around every post and everything. We've got a great bunch of employees, from whether it's at the top or to the bottom of the scale, and they all are doing a great job, and we're proud of them, and we want to do what we can to help them, and we're working toward that goal.
It's kind of the continuing challenge, whether you're a city, a state, or a university, the revenues and the expenses. Or personal, we have revenues and expenses.
Exactly.
And so much of it depends upon, it's not your want to, you have to have the revenue to be able to can do it not only this year, but it has to be sustainable. You have to be able to do it next year, because if you put something in the budget this year, like a pay raise, that comes around next year and the next year and the next year. So you know, those are some of the challenges. And when it's hard to draw the line sometimes, but sometimes you just have to do that. And that's for the good, because if you don't do that, you don't keep your ship afloat, and you got to keep your ship afloat above all.
And of course, sales tax are the main sources of revenue for the city.
Yeah, about 80% of our revenue comes through sales taxes.
So as you mentioned, you're impacted by decreasing local sales and tying things together directly along those lines. So when you're preparing the budget, presenting the numbers, people are seeing those, understanding that this is based on perhaps calculations of what we'll get next year in sales tax.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's also important for residents to know that we have actually 24 separate funds across the city. And if you think of those as different businesses, you can't spend dollars in one fund to benefit another fund. Really, we only have one fund citywide in our general fund that can cover expenses in any of the other 23 funds. And so you hear a lot recently of talk about the financial challenges or the constraints that we face, and we're really seeing that in our general fund. So we're working on ways with council and with staff and with the public to identify those programs and services that we offer through that fund, public safety and public works being the two main users of those revenues, but those are also the three most important probably services that we offer to the community. You know, it's hard to have a community if you don't have sewer services and public protection and streets to drive on and things like that. So we do have some challenges, but overall I think we're in pretty good shape, and we're adding a little bit of money to our general fund balance next fiscal year, and hopefully we're low on our projections for revenue. But we also are pretty conservative on our expenses as well.
So you're looking to the future when you do look at the budget. That
yes,
not just
absolutely.
now, like November 1st, and we'll worry about it next year.
Certainly. Yeah, we have to look at how it's going to affect us in the years to come as well.
Tying all that together. So that process that you're going through as we're recording this program is still underway, but eventually council will have this final say and approval and what you're looking at along those lines. You mentioned certain, I guess, funds, and there's certain pots of money like tornado recovery funds. Those have designated purposes. You can't say we got X number of millions from the federal government, let's just use it for this.
Right.
Yeah, there's those funds. The largest pot of funds that we receive are really from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and so you really have to focus on one of three areas when you spend those dollars: unmet needs, or an urgent need, or really to help benefit low to moderate income residents. And so you do have some constraints in how you can spend those dollars. And we talked earlier, I think before the show, about the deadline that we have as a community. We received about $113 million in the second allocation for disaster recovery, and we have a deadline of September of 2019 to spend those funds. And working with our consultants who help administer the programs and things, we're comfortable. We're one of the few cities actually in the country that are still on track to spend those funds by September of 2019. Other cities have a lot of challenges that are different than ours, but that's something I think we can be proud of as a community to say, listen, we're spending the dollars that we received in response to this event, and we're doing it effectively, and we're doing it on time.
And spending those funds means, once again, targeting certain needs or certain parts of town.
Yes.
Somebody might live over here and say, well, why aren't you fixing the roads on my part of town?
Yeah, and we do have a plan, or we would like to fix every road in the city on a routine basis. But again, a lot of that depends upon the income. A lot of that depends upon what the winter has done for you for the year before, and what caused the problems that it's challenged, that it's caused, and everything. And Sam has mentioned, and you have too, Judy, that one of the things that's hard for citizens to understand is that when we get a certain pot of money, it is designated for certain projects, and so a lot of it here recently has been spent in the area that was affected by the tornado, and obviously I've had folks ask me, are you just trying to aggravate us with all those cones around town? But the truth of the matter is that we have a time period that if we don't use that money and get done what we need to get done, then we'll lose it. And so, and our team has done a great job on that. They really have. I know they spent a lot of hours working on that, because, as great as our government is, and we live in the greatest country in the world, But the government, when you use some money that they give you, they expect you to dot a lot of I's and cross a lot of T's.
A lot of reporting back.
A lot of reports, and so they do a great job, and that's why we're able to have that money to use.
So a year from now, those will be spent. We'll have completed that type of recovery and so forth.
Yeah, and the Mayor mentioned, the review that the federal government does with a lot of those funds. We have to make sure that we're spending those dollars appropriately. Otherwise, we have to pay that money back. And actually, HUD has noted City of Joplin for 3 exemplary practices, not just best practices that are known in the industry to be followed, but actually 3 exemplary practices where they're going out to other areas, other communities that have been affected by disasters, and saying you should do it the Joplin way because they're doing really well. Recently, HUD highlighted on their website one of the disaster recovery projects that we partnered with Joplin schools on, the Early Childhood Center, using $10 million of state disaster dollars plus $5 million of state dollars plus $5 million of city dollars to put an early childhood center together that really will serve up to 400 students at its fullest capacity, and that's a project, the first project that HUD has ever spotlighted on their website using those disaster funds. That's something I think we're proud of, and I think just a testament to the hard work of our staff, not just in our planning department, but throughout the organization for the amount and the type of work that they've been doing. So can't be prouder of them.
So there's a lot of partnerships even beyond recovery from disasters where you're looking at the state, talking to the federal, what are some other options out there maybe beyond the revenues we're getting from sales tax to try to do things.
Oh, obviously,
projects and so forth.
You bet. And we owe a great deal of gratitude to our state reps who have been working to help us, and of course Ron Richards has been a friend, former mayor, and he's been so successful in his career, both in the House and in the Senate, and as leader in both of them. And he's well liked around the state, and that is, that doesn't hurt either. There were a couple of years ago. Actually, when I was mayor before, Ron had done some historic preservation work for the city of St. Louis, and the mayor of St. Louis, Francis Slay, called me and said, "I want to come to Joplin." So he came to Joplin, and the council hosted him, had a little lunch with him, and so forth, and we got to show things off, and he was surprised at what really was going on in Joplin, compared to his city. But and of course, Sam's from that part of the world too, so we brought a little bit of St. Louis down here as well. But there are a lot of things that are going on in our city, and I've encouraged our staff to so many of the times you're worried about the fallen trees and the challenges that are coming to you with problems, and everything. But every once in a while we need to take a time and tell a little bit about some of the good things that are going on. There are a lot of good things that are happening right now, and we have for our 7 years been recovering. But now we're almost completely recovered, and we see a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and a lot of our citizens have formed groups and like Vision 2022 and so forth, and the arts folks that they're looking at things to help move us on and get us things that we can look forward to and things that take us from recovery into development and growth, and I'm excited about that.
So where do we go from here? And I know there was just a recent news release about the airport receiving some federal funds, which John Q. Public might say, so what does that mean? But that ties into a need at the airport that ties into economic development in a lot of different areas. Yeah,
the U.S. Department of Transportation used to have what they called a TIGER program, which is really an infrastructure funding program for cities across the country. It was a competitive grant program to receive dollars. The overpass over 20th Street near the high school was a TIGER-funded project. A few of our 26th Street and Maiden Lane, I think, were projects that we used that funding for. Well, under the new administration, they sort of revamped that program and made some money available specifically for airports, and so we applied for a grant, competitive again, but one of 3 airports in the state of Missouri to actually receive funding. So we're going to use about $7.5 million of federal funding to reconstruct one of our taxiways. If you've flown out of Joplin recently, or if you've paid attention to the news, you noticed that we've gotten bigger planes. We added a 3rd flight over the summer that was temporary, but sort of a test market for a potential 3rd flight out of Joplin. But bigger planes require bigger and
They're heavier,
sturdier
they're wider.
infrastructure. With all of the blessings have come some challenges, and so we identified a need to really reconstruct that taxiway, and we were just notified yesterday actually that we received that funding. So Mayor mentioned earlier, part of the work of council is to have those special meetings every now and then. So we'll have a special meeting on Monday night to approve that grant.
To accept it and say we're going to use it.
Sure, yeah.
Yep, so.
And then those grants come with we have normally it's 95.5 this particular grant, so we had to put a little, and while we're getting 7.5, we had to pay like 395,000. But that comes out of another one of our funds. Capital
Transportation Trust Fund.
Yeah.
So you have a pot of money sitting there to be used.
That can be used for that. But when those bigger planes bring more people in, and we like that. And but it's like some of the intersections in town that you see that are bumpy. Those big trucks that haul all those products in we need, they weigh on that pavement, and that's what's happened to our runways. Our runways are and we hope they get even busier. We've been trying to promote getting a flight to Chicago, and we haven't achieved that yet, but we're working on those things. And Steve and his crew out there, and of course some of our reps and so forth, state reps and so forth, are helping us with those.
So a lot of things that are going on. You mentioned briefly citizen involvement, people on boards and commissions. I know the council people watch. You appoint people to that. Are you always looking for someone to help fill some of those slots?
Absolutely, and we do try very much. So, we have a finance committee. I mean, we have. Parks and Recreation has a Parks Committee. The Convention and Business Bureau has a committee, and I'm going to leave some of them out. I don't hate to do that, but every one of them have a group of our citizens that participate on that, and so we try to any of the information and decisions that the council is making, if it pertains to that particular area in our city, we try to use those boards and commissions. We run it by them first, and they make a recommendation to us, and then our staff makes a recommendation to us as well, so that any decision that you make, the more information you can make, the more information you can obtain, the better decision you can make. And so it's these citizens are these commissions and boards are really a blessing to us. And if there's folks out there, if they want to be a part of their community, that's where I started. I started on historic preservation, and then I went to zoning and planning, and then the mayor came to me and says, I think it's time for you to go on the council, so I ran for that. So, I encourage folks, if these boards and commissions don't take a lot of time, but they do, it is an opportunity for them to give back to their community. Encourage them to do so. All they have to do is call the city clerk. She can send them an application, or now they can get online at our website and get an application. And we're constantly adding folks to that. They serve certain terms, so that the turnover continues and not too much work for anybody. But it's a great way to give back and be a part of your community.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for visiting with us today. I know there's a lot of other topics we could cover about the city, but for kind of an update for the viewers, providing what's happening here in Joplin. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Judy. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't thank Missouri Southern for all that they do for the city. You broadcast our meetings, and it's the young people you send down there. It's a joy to deal with them, and we certainly thank you and appreciate what you all do for us.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.